Most people wake up on Christmas to presents and pancakes, but I came home from a 12-hour night shift to a slap across the face. I am 28 years old, yet standing in that kitchen, clutching the old wooden box my grandfather sent. I felt like a helpless child again. My stepmother thought violence would keep me in line, but she did not know what was inside that package. It was not just a gift. It was my freedom. My name is Sabrina Erickson, and by the time I pulled my beaten-up sedan into the driveway of the two-story colonial in Ridgefield, Colorado, I had been awake for 26 hours. The snow was coming down in thick, heavy sheets, burying the world in white silence. But inside my head, the noise of the emergency room was still screaming. I could still hear the beeping of the monitors from Bay 4 and the wail of the mother whose son had come in after a bad skid on the ice. Being an ER nurse meant you saw the worst of the holidays, the parts that did not make it onto greeting cards. My scrubs were stained with coffee and sweat. My back ached with a dull, throbbing rhythm, and my eyes felt like they were packed with sand. I was 28 years old, but in that moment, gripping the steering wheel with trembling hands, I felt ancient. I sat in the car for a moment, staring at the house. It was picture perfect, aggressive in its festivity. Every roofline was traced with bright white lights, and the giant wreath on the front door was so large it looked like a portal to another dimension. This was the Monroe residence, the envy of the neighborhood, the stage upon which my stepmother, Avery, performed her life. To the neighbors, it was a warm, welcoming hearth. To me, it was a place where I walked on eggshells that Avery had shattered on purpose. I took a deep breath, the cold air of the car interior biting at my lungs, and grabbed my bag. I just wanted to sleep for 5 hours, just 5 hours. Then I would get up, put on the smile, and play the part of the grateful stepdaughter. That was the deal. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The heat hit me instantly, carrying the scent of cinnamon, pine, and expensive perfume. It smelled like a candle shop, overwhelming and cloying. Bing Crosby was crooning about a white Christmas from the surround sound speakers that Dan, my father, had installed last summer per Avery's instructions. The foyer was spotless, not a shoe out of place, not a speck of dust on the polished hardwood. I kicked off my wet boots onto the rubber mat I was strictly designated to use and looked up. Avery was already there. She stood in the archway leading to the living room, a vision of manufactured holiday cheer. She was wearing a blood-red velvet dress that hugged her figure, her hair coiffed into perfect blonde waves that did not move when she tilted her head. In one hand, she held a crystal flute filled with a mimosa, the orange juice barely tinting the champagne. She looked at her watch, a gold timepiece that cost more than my car, and then looked at me with a sneer that transformed her face from beautiful to predatory. "You are late," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it had a cutting edge, like a scalpel. I just got off shift. "Avery," I said, my voice raspy, "the roads are a nightmare. There is a blizzard out there. I saw 3 cars in the ditch on the way home." "Excuses," she snapped, taking a sip of her drink. "We have the VIP guests arriving at 2 in the afternoon. The mayor's wife might come. Do you understand what that means? And look at you. You look like a corpse. I need you to peel the potatoes and set the table before you even think about showering. The caterers are late, and I'm not going to let this brunch be a disaster because you decided to drag your feet." I felt a flare of anger, hot and sharp, but I swallowed it down. It was Christmas morning. I did not have the energy to fight. I walked past her toward the kitchen, my socks sliding on the floor. In the kitchen, the chaos was controlled but palpable. My father, Dan Monroe, was standing by the island, wrestling with a massive ham. He looked older than his 55 years, his shoulders slumped, his hair thinning. When I walked in, he glanced up, his eyes meeting mine for a fraction of a second before darting away. He looked at the ham, at the oven, at the floor, anywhere but at me. "Hey, Dad," I said softly. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas." "Sabby," he mumbled, his voice low. He wiped his hands on a towel, looking nervous. He knew the storm that was brewing. He always knew. But like always, he chose to be a ghost in his own house rather than a father. He did not ask how my shift was. He did not ask if I was okay driving in the storm. He just focused on the ham, terrified that if he stopped working, Avery would turn her laser sights on him. I sighed and leaned against the counter, reaching for a glass of water. That was when I saw it. Sitting on the far end of the dining table, which was already half set with the good china, was a box. It was out of place in Avery's curated world. It was a rough, wooden box, about the size of a shoebox, made of dark, varnished timber that looked old and weathered. The corners were worn smooth, and it was tied not with a satin ribbon, but with simple twine. I walked over to it, drawn by a magnetic pull I could not explain. I looked at the label. The postage stamp was from Santa Fe, New Mexico. The handwriting was shaky but bold, done in thick black ink. To Sabrina Erickson, from Harold Monroe. My heart stopped. Grandpa Harold. For the last 3 years, Avery had told us that Grandpa Harold had gone senile, that he had become bitter and cut the family off. She said he shouted at her over the phone, told her he never wanted to hear from Dan or that leech daughter of his again. I had sent cards, letters, even emails, but I never got a reply. I assumed he hated me. I assumed he had forgotten me. But here was a box, addressed to me. I reached out and touched the wood. It felt cool and solid. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Avery clicked her heels as she walked into the kitchen, the mimosa glass nearly empty now. "Oh, that. The postman dropped it off yesterday evening. I forgot about it. Probably just some old junk he's clearing out before he kicks the bucket. I was going to throw it out, but I thought it might be amusing to see what the old miser sent." "It is addressed to me," I said, ignoring her insult. "So?" Avery shrugged, leaning against the doorframe. "You live under my roof. Everything that comes through that door is my business." I picked up the box. It was heavier than it looked. Something dense was inside. I wanted to take it upstairs. I wanted to be alone with it. I needed to know why he had written to me after 3 years of silence. I did not want Avery's poison to taint whatever was inside. "I am going to take this to my room," I said, clutching the box to my chest. "No, you are not," Avery said sharply. Her casual demeanor vanished instantly. "Open it here." "Why?" I asked, turning to face her. "Because it is Christmas. Sabrina, we are a family. We open gifts together. It is tradition. Besides, I want to see what it is. If he sent money, that belongs to the household expenses. God knows you do not contribute enough with that nurse's salary of yours." "I pay rent. Avery," I said, the exhaustion making my filter thin. "I pay for the groceries. I pay the electric bill." "And who pays for the mortgage? Who pays for the maintenance?" Avery's voice rose, shrill and piercing. "Open the box. Now!" I looked at my father. "Dad?" I asked, pleading with him to intervene. "Just this once." Dan looked up from the ham, his face pale. Just open it. Sabby, let's not have a fight. Please, it's Christmas." The betrayal stung more than the fatigue. He would sell me out for a quiet morning. I looked back at Avery. She was smiling, a triumphant, cruel smile. She thought she had won. She thought I was the same scared little girl she had bullied when she first moved in. But I was 28. I saved lives for a living. I had held the hands of dying men. I was not going to let her have this. "No," I said firm. The room went silent. The Christmas music seemed to get louder. "May your days be merry and bright." "Excuse me?" Avery whispered, stepping closer. I said no. I repeated, tightening my grip on the box. "This is from my grandfather. It is for me. I am going to open it in private. You can wait." I turned to walk toward the hallway. That was when she snapped. I heard the click of her heels on the tile before I felt her. Avery lunged at me, her hand grabbing my upper arm. Her nails dug into my skin through the scrub top. "Give me that box," she shrieked. She yanked me back with surprising strength. I was off balance, tired and weak, and I stumbled. My back slammed hard against the edge of the heavy oak dining table. A sharp cry of pain escaped my lips as the wood dug into my spine, right where the muscles were already knotted from lifting patience all night. "Let go," I shouted, trying to twist away. Avery did not let go. She was fueled by rage and mimosa. Her face was twisted, her eyes bulging. She reached for the box with her other hand, clawing at it. "You ungrateful little brat! After everything I do for you, give it to me." I pulled the box away, tucking it under my stomach, curling around it to protect it. I was an adult woman, being wrestled in my own kitchen by my stepmother while my father watched. It was absurd. It was a nightmare. When she realized she could not pry the box loose, she let go of the box and swung. Her palm connected with the side of my face with a cracking sound that echoed in the kitchen. It was not a light tap. It was a full-force slap. My head snapped to the side. My ear rang with a high-pitched whine. The skin on my cheek burned instantly, hot and stinging. I froze. The kitchen froze. Even the music seemed to pause for a beat before continuing. I stood there, breathing heavily, the box pressed against my ribs. I touched my cheek. It was throbbing. I looked at Avery. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving under the red velvet. She looked shocked for a second, as if she had not meant to go that far. But then the shock was replaced by a defensive, haughty glare. "You made me do that," she hissed, pointing a manicured finger at me. "You disrespected me in my own house." I looked at my father. He was staring at us, his mouth slightly open, the carving knife hanging loosely in his hand. He did not move. He did not say a word. He just looked sad and frightened. The shame washed over me then, not for me, but for them, for this house, for the lie we were living. I was a grown woman, a professional, and I had just been assaulted next to a Christmas tree because I wanted to keep a letter from my grandfather private. I did not say anything. I could not. If I opened my mouth, I would scream, and if I started screaming, I might never stop. I clutched the box tighter, turned on my heel, and ran. I ran out of the kitchen, past the perfectly decorated foyer, and up the stairs. I heard Avery shouting something behind me. "Don't you dare walk away from me!" But her voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. I took the stairs 2 at a time, ignoring the pain in my back and the throbbing in my cheek. I reached the second-floor landing and kept going, opening the narrow door that led to the attic. My room. It was a converted attic space, small and slanted, freezing in the winter and boiling in the summer. It was the only place Avery never went, because the ceiling was too low for her to stand up straight in her heels. I scrambled inside and slammed the door shut, turning the flimsy lock. I slid down against the door, my legs finally giving out. I sat on the floorboards, gasping for air, the wooden box resting on my lap. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I could hear the muffled sounds of Avery yelling downstairs, probably berating my father now. But up here, the world was shrinking down to just me and the box. I touched my cheek again. It was tender. I would have a bruise for Christmas. I looked down at the box. The twine was rough against my fingers. The silence of the attic wrapped around me, a cold but welcome blanket. I was shaking, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline and the sheer violation of what had just happened. But beneath the fear and the anger, there was something else, a flicker of hope. Grandpa Harold had sent this. He had not forgotten. I wiped a tear from my eye, took a deep breath, and reached for the knot in the twine. Whatever was in here, it was the only real thing in this house, and I was finally ready to see it. The attic window was a small, frosted square that looked down over the backyard. From up here, the world looked peaceful, buried under 2 feet of pristine white snow. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass, letting the chill seep into my skin, trying to numb the throbbing heat on my cheek where Avery had slapped me. Down below, I could see the outline of the garden beds my mother had once tended with such gentle hands. She used to grow tomatoes and wild daisies, messy and vibrant. Now, Those beds were encased in rigid, geometric brick borders that Avery had installed 3 months after moving in. Everything had to be structured. Everything had to be photogenic. It was strange how a house could change its soul without changing its bones. I looked down at the wooden box on my lap, but my mind drifted back. Dragged by the gravity of the bruise on my face, I needed to understand how I had gotten here. How a 28-year-old trauma nurse, someone who could intubate a patient in a moving ambulance, had been reduced to a trembling child hiding in an attic. It had not happened overnight. It was a slow, methodical erosion, like water dripping on stone. I remembered the day my father introduced us. It was 2 years after Mom died of ovarian cancer. Dad had been a ghost of himself, wandering through the rooms of this house like he was haunting his own life. Then came Avery. She was a widow too, though she wore her grief like a fashionable accessory rather than a heavy coat. She was an event planner by trade, and when she looked at my father, I do not think she saw a partner. She saw a venue that needed managing. She moved in 6 months later, and the transformation began. At first, it was subtle. She suggested we declutter. That meant boxing up Mom's knickknacks and donating them to Goodwill while I was at work. Then came the renovations. She wanted an open concept because it was better for entertaining. She meant it was better for her to hold court. I remembered the first Christmas she lived here. I was 22, just finishing nursing school, exhausted and grieving. Avery had announced we were hosting the neighborhood holiday party. I thought we would cook together. Instead, I spent 14 hours in the kitchen. I peeled 10 pounds of potatoes. I basted the turkey every 30 minutes. I made the cranberry sauce from scratch because Avery said the canned stuff was trashy. When the guests arrived, Avery emerged from the bedroom in a shimmering gold gown, holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres I had assembled. Everyone gushed over the food, the moist turkey, the perfect stuffing. Avery just smiled, tilted her head, and said, "It is a labor of love. I just want to make this house warm for everyone." She never mentioned my name, not once, and when I came out of the kitchen, wearing an apron stained with gravy, wiping sweat from my forehead, she looked at me with a tight, pitying smile and said to the neighbors, "Oh, Sabrina, you look a mess. Why do you not go upstairs and freshen up? You are ruining the aesthetic." I should have left then. I should have moved out the second I got my nursing license. But the housing market in Ridgefield was brutal, and Dad had looked at me with those sad, pleading eyes and said, "Stay, Sabby. It helps with the bills, and I like having you close." So I stayed, and that was my fatal mistake. Avery monetized my presence. She calculated the value of my guilt and my desire to please my father, and she exploited it with the precision of a forensic accountant. I worked the night shift at the hospital, 7 in the evening to 7 in the morning. It was brutal work. I dealt with car crashes, overdoses, and heart attacks. I came home smelling of antiseptic and death, my body vibrating with exhaustion. But the moment I walked through the door, the second shift began. Avery would be sitting at the kitchen table with her coffee and her iPad, looking fresh and rested. "Good morning," she would say, never looking up. "Since you are up, the dishwasher needs unloading, and the downstairs bathroom needs a scrub before the book club comes at noon. Oh, and we are out of almond milk. Run to the store, would you?" If I protested, if I said I had been on my feet for 12 hours, she would sigh, a long, heavy sigh that seemed to suck the air out of the room. "We are a family. Sabrina," she would say, "family supports each other. Your father works so hard, and I am busy managing the household. You live here rent-free. The least you can do is contribute." Rent-free. That was the phrase she wielded like a weapon. But it was a lie. It was a mathematical falsehood. I paid for the groceries every week, a bill that usually ran over $300 because Avery insisted on organic everything and expensive cuts of meat that she would ruin and then blame the oven for. I paid the electric bill, which was astronomical because she left the lights on all day to make the house look welcoming from the street. I even paid for the internet upgrade she demanded because her live stream lagged. Last year, she decided she wanted to be a lifestyle influencer. She turned the living room into a studio, She needed a specific shade of beige paint, new curtains, and a ring light setup. "Dad is a little short this month," she had told me, putting a hand on my shoulder. "Can you cover the contractors? It is an investment. Once my channel takes off, I will pay you back double." I transferred $2,000 from my savings account. I never saw a dime of it back. Instead, I saw her on Instagram, sitting in the corner I paid for, talking to her 300 followers about how to create a sanctuary of peace on a budget. And Dad? He was the silent partner in this enterprise. Whenever I tried to talk to him, to tell him I was drowning, to tell him that I was sleeping 4 hours a day because Avery was running the vacuum cleaner outside my door, he would shrink. "She is just trying to make a nice home. Sabby," he would say, rubbing the back of his neck. "Please, I just want peace." He wanted peace, so he fed me to the wolf. Then there was Zoe. Zoe was Avery's daughter from her first marriage. She was 19, studying fashion marketing in California. She was everything I was not allowed to be: demanding, loud, and pampered. When Zoe came home for the holidays, the dynamic shifted from exploitation to servitude. "Sabrina, Zoe needs a ride to the airport. Her flight lands at midnight. But I have a shift at 7 the next morning." I would say, "So? You are used to being up late." Avery would counter, "Do not be selfish. She is your sister." She was not my sister. She was a stranger who treated me like an Uber driver who did not deserve a tip. I drove her to the mall and waited in the car while she shopped because she did not want to be seen with me in my scrubs. I took hundreds of photos of her in the backyard for her social media, crouching in the snow to get the right angle while she critiqued my composition. When Zoe was home, the fridge was stocked with her favorite expensive snacks, paid for by me. The heating was cranked up to 75 degrees, paid for by me. And I slept on the couch in the basement for 3 days last Thanksgiving because Zoe wanted my room for her luggage. She said the guest room closet was too small for her coats. But the worst part, the part that truly turned my stomach as I sat there in the attic, was the invasion of my professional life. Avery did not respect my job. To her, nursing was just a messy blue-collar thing I did that inconvenienced her schedule. 2 months ago, I was in the middle of a code blue. We were doing chest compressions on a 40-year-old father of 2. My phone started buzzing in my pocket. It buzzed and buzzed. I ignored it. We saved the man. Afterward, shaking with adrenaline, I checked my phone. 7 missed calls from Avery. I panicked. I thought Dad had a heart attack. I called her back, my hands trembling. "What happened? Is Dad okay?" I gasped. "Oh, he is fine," Avery said, her voice breezy. "I am at the store looking for napkins for the gala. Do you think dusty rose or champagne gold looks better with the tablecloths? I sent you a picture. Why did you not pick up?" I stood in the hospital hallway, surrounded by the smell of bleach and sickness, and I felt something inside me snap. I was saving a life. "Avery," I whispered. "Well, you do not have to be so dramatic," she huffed. "It is just a question. I value your opinion. You know." She did not value my opinion. She valued my submission. She wanted to know that she could reach out and yank my leash at any hour of the day or night, and I would answer. But the memory that haunted me the most, the one that made the box in my lap feel heavy with portent, happened 6 months ago. It was the reading of Grandpa Harold's preliminary will. Grandpa had been sick for a while, but he lived in Santa Fe, and Avery always found a reason why we could not visit. The car needed repairs, the flights were too expensive, the weather was bad, and eventually, she told us he did not want to see us. When his health declined sharply, his lawyer arranged a Zoom call for the family to discuss his end-of-life arrangements and the preliminary distribution of his assets. I had swapped shifts to be there. I sat at the dining room table, dressed in a nice blouse, waiting for the connection. Avery sat in the middle, flanked by Dan. She controlled the laptop. The screen flickered. We saw the lawyer, a man I did not recognize, and then, briefly, Grandpa Harold lying in a hospital bed. He looked frail, but his eyes were sharp. He looked right at the camera. "Sabrina?" he croaked. Is Sabrina there? I leaned forward. Grandpa, I am here. I am. Suddenly, the screen went black. Oh no, Avery said, her voice dripping with fake concern. The internet is acting up again. I told you to upgrade the router. Dan. She clicked frantically on the keyboard. I cannot get the video back, she said, but the audio is still on. Can you hear us? There was static, and then the lawyer's voice came through, distorted and choppy. We can hear you. Mrs. Monroe, regarding the estate. The connection kept dropping in and out. Avery relayed the information to us. She listened intently, nodding, frowning, then turning to us with a somber face. He says, she paused, looking at Dad, then at me. He says he's leaving the bulk of the estate to charity. There is a small stipend for Dan, and She looked at me, her eyes wide and sorrowful. Sabrina, he did not mention you. The lawyer asked if there were any other beneficiaries, and Harold said no. He said he has not heard from you in years and assumes you have moved on. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I wrote him. I cried. I sent him letters. Avery sighed and patted my hand. I know, sweetie. Old people get confused. Or maybe he just held a grudge. You know how he was. She never reconnected the video. We never spoke to the lawyer directly again. Avery handled the rest via email, claiming it was too emotional for Dad. For 6 months, I lived with the crushing weight of that rejection. I thought my grandfather, the man who taught me how to ride a bike and snuck me chocolate when Mom said no, had died thinking I did not care about him. I thought he had erased me from his heart because I was not a good enough granddaughter. It broke something in me. It made me quieter. It made me work more shifts. It made me accept Avery's abuse because I felt like maybe I deserved it. If my own grandfather could discard me, why should I expect better from a stepmother? But now, sitting in the cold attic, I ran my thumb over the rough wood of the box. To Sabrina Erickson, from Harold Monroe. The box was here. The postmark was dated 3 days before he died. If he had forgotten me, if he had cut me out, why would he send this? And more importantly, why had Avery tried so hard to stop me from opening it? The memory of the Zoom call replayed in my mind, but this time, with a colder, sharper lens, the internet going out exactly when he asked for me, Avery relaying the information, her refusal to let me see the emails from the lawyer. I looked at the lock on the box. It was a simple latch, secured with a small padlock that hung from a red ribbon. I did not have the key, but I was a nurse. I knew how to improvise. I pulled a bobby pin from my messy bun, the metal cold against my fingers. The narrative of the ungrateful granddaughter was about to be tested. I had spent years being the servant in the perfect house, paying for the privilege of being treated like dirt. I had believed their version of reality because I was too tired to fight it. But the slap downstairs had woken me up, and this box felt like an anchor in the storm. I inserted the pin into the lock. I was done with the lies. I was done with the silence. I twisted the metal, feeling for the catch. It was time to see what the dead had to say. I sat on the floor of the attic, my back pressed against the rough insulation of the wall. I had found a forgotten, dusty washcloth in a box of old linens and dampened it with the melted snow from the window ledge to press against my cheek. The cold sting helped numb the throbbing heat where Avery had struck me, but it could not numb the cold knot of dread in my stomach. Downstairs, I could hear the faint, muffled sounds of the Christmas playlist starting over, Michael Bublé singing about coming home, but up here, the silence was heavy and thick with dust. I pulled the wooden box onto my lap, now that the adrenaline of the confrontation was fading, leaving me with a shaky, hollow feeling. I could look at it properly. It was made of dark cherry wood, stained deep and rich, with corners that had been smoothed down by decades of handling. On the inside of the lid, I knew I would find his initials, but even on the outside, I could feel his presence. It smelled faintly of cedar and the pipe tobacco he used to smoke when I was a little girl, before the doctors made him quit. I had tried to pick the lock with a pin in my panic, but my hands had been shaking too badly. Now, Looking closer at the red ribbon wrapped around the box, I saw something glinting in the folds of the bow. I untangled the knot with trembling fingers, and something small and metallic fell into my lap. It was a tiny brass key, no bigger than my thumb, tied to the ribbon with a piece of fishing line. Of course, Grandpa Harold never made anything easy, but he always gave you the tools if you looked hard enough. I slid the key into the small padlock. It turned with a dry, satisfying click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet attic. I took a breath, held it, and lifted the lid. The first thing I saw was paper, a lot of paper, but on top of the stack lay a single, thick, cream-colored envelope with my name written in that familiar, blocky scrawl. Next to it was a silver USB drive with a piece of masking tape stuck to it. On the tape, written in red marker, were the words, "Play when you are ready," and tucked into the corner was a heavy silver key with a green plastic tag labeled with a sequence of numbers. I reached for the letter first. My hands were shaking so much that the paper rattled as I broke the wax seal. I unfolded the pages. There were 3 of them, covered in his dense, spiky handwriting. My dearest Sabrina, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. And if you are reading this, it also means that I know they lied to you. They lied to you about me. They lied to you about my money. And most unforgivably, they lied to you about yourself. I let out a sob that I had not known I was holding back. The tears blurred the ink for a second, and I had to wipe my eyes frantically. It was his voice. I could hear him speaking the words, gruff but warm, cutting through the 3 years of silence Avery had manufactured. I know what you have been told. The letter continued. You were told that I became a bitter old man. You were told that I cut you off because I did not care. You were probably told that I went senile and forgot who you were. That is what Avery wanted everyone to believe. It made it easier for her to justify what she was doing. I traced the words with my finger. He knew. He had known all along. 3 years ago, just before I stopped coming to Ridgefield, I overheard a conversation. I was in the guest room, and Avery thought I was asleep. She was in the hallway with your father. She was whispering. But you know how sound carries in that house. She was telling Dan that he needed to convince me to sell the ranch land immediately. She said, "We need to get his liquid assets into a joint account before the old man changes his mind or gives it to that nurse daughter of yours." My stomach turned over. I remembered that visit. Avery had been so sweet to him to his face, bringing him tea and fluffing his pillows. I realized then that I was not a guest in that house. I was a prey animal. The letter read, "And I saw how she treated you. Sabrina, I saw how she made you work while she sat. I saw how your father looked away. I wanted to scream, but I knew if I made a scene, she would cut me off from you completely. She would poison your mind against me. So, I decided to play her game. I played the confused old man. I let her think she was winning. I tried to email you, Sabrina, dozens of times. I sent letters to the hospital. I suspect they never reached you. Avery has a way of making things disappear. When I realized I could not reach you directly, I started building a wall around what was yours." I flipped to the second page. There are 2 wills. Sabrina, the one Avery will have read, the one she likely hired her own lawyer to draft, is a fabrication. I signed a version of it under duress just to keep her quiet, knowing it would be contested. But the real will, the one that is legally binding and registered with the state of New Mexico, is in the safety deposit box this key opens. I looked at the silver key with the green tag. In the real will, I have left the house in Santa Fe, the land, and my investment portfolio entirely to you. But there is a condition. You cannot use a single cent of it to pay off any debt held by Dan or Avery Monroe. If you do, the funds divert to the grandnieces of my late wife. This money is for your freedom, Sabrina, not for their comfort." I gasped. The house in Santa Fe? The investments? Avery had told us he died broke, that his medical bills had eaten everything. I also know that probate takes time. The letter went on, and I know Avery. She will try to starve you out. She will try to make you feel helpless so you sign over your rights. That is why I did something a little drastic. I turned to the last page. Use the key. Go to the First National Bank of Santa Fe. Over a year ago, I liquidated my personal savings, money Avery did not know existed, and transferred it into a trust account in your name. You have been the sole owner of this account for 12 months. You just did not know it. The balance is $350,000. I stopped breathing. The world tilted on its axis. $350,000. I read the number again. $350,000. I looked around the cramped, freezing attic. I looked at my worn-out nurse shoes in the corner. I looked at the stack of bills on my desk, my car insurance, my student loans, the electric bill Avery had left on my pillow this morning with a sticky note saying, "Please pay ASAP." I had been drowning in debt, working 60 hours a week, eating instant noodles, and tolerating abuse because I was terrified of being homeless. And all this time, for a whole year, I had been safe. I had been free. I just had not known it because they kept the truth from me. I put the letter down, my hands shaking violently now, not from fear, but from a sudden, overwhelming surge of rage. I picked up the stack of stapled papers. It was all there. The first document was a photocopy of the shadow will, drafted by a lawyer named Grace Holloway. It was dated and notarized. It clearly stated that Harold Monroe was of sound mind and body. Behind that were copies of bank statements. My grandfather had been meticulous. He had highlighted lines in yellow ink. August 12th, withdrawal, $5,000. Dan asked for car repairs. I saw Avery with a new handbag 2 days later. September 30th, withdrawal, $8,000. Avery said the roof was leaking. The roofer I called said no work was done. December 15th, withdrawal, $12,000. Christmas party fund. They did not invite me. There were pages of this, a detailed ledger of theft. He had tracked every dollar they had squeezed out of him while he was alive. He had documented the dates Avery took him to the bank, the times she had forged his signature on checks. He had circled the signatures and written forgery in big block letters next to them. It was a dossier of greed. It proved that the perfect family downstairs was built on the financial cannibalization of an old man who they thought was too weak to notice. I picked up the silver key again. It felt heavy and cold. This was not just a key to a box. It was a key to a different life. It was a weapon. Avery had slapped me because she thought I was powerless. She thought I was the same little girl who desperately wanted a mother figure. The same young woman who stayed because she felt guilty about leaving her dad. She thought she could control the narrative because she controlled the information. But she did not know about the box. She did not know that while she was downstairs sipping mimosas and bragging to the neighbors about her charity work, her victim was upstairs holding the evidence that could send her to prison. I looked at the USB drive. Play when you are ready. I was not ready for the video yet. My heart was already racing too fast. My head spinning with the magnitude of what I had just read. I needed to process the letter first. I needed to process the fact that Grandpa Harold had loved me enough to play a long, lonely game of chess against Avery just to ensure I would be okay. I touched the bruise on my cheek again. It still hurt, but the pain felt different now. It was no longer the sting of humiliation. It was the evidence of her desperation. She had hit me because she was afraid. She had tried to steal the box because deep down, she knew her house of cards was flimsy. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. I gathered the papers. I held the key tight in my fist, the metal biting into my palm. I was not just Sabrina the nurse anymore. I was not just the stepdaughter. I was the owner of $350,000 and the sole heir to the Monroe estate. I stood up, my legs steady for the first time since I walked into the house. I walked to the window and looked down at the snow again. The white world looked different. It did not look cold and forbidding anymore. It looked like a blank canvas. Avery was downstairs waiting for me to come down, apologize, and peel her potatoes. She was expecting the beaten dog to return to the master. She was going to be very, very surprised. I tucked the key into the safest place I could think of, inside the lining of my bra. I put the papers and the letter back into the box, locked it, and hid the box under the loose floorboard beneath my bed, pulling the rug over it. I would go downstairs. I would play my part for a few more hours. I would let them think they still owned me. But I knew the truth now, and the truth was worth more than $350,000. The truth was that I was not the one who needed them. They were the ones who needed me to keep their lie alive. And I was about to kill it. I sat cross-legged on the floor of the attic, my phone in my hand, transforming from a victim into a forensic investigator. The nurse in me took over. When a patient comes in with a trauma, you do not panic. You assess the damage, document the injuries, and stabilize the situation. My life was the trauma patient, and the box was the diagnostic scan that revealed the internal bleeding. I laid each document out on the dusty floorboards, smoothing the creases with careful fingers. I took high-resolution photographs of every single page: the real will, the bank statements, the handwritten log of Avery's thefts, and Grandpa's letter. I created a new folder in a cloud storage account that I had set up years ago for my nursing school backups, a password-protected vault that Avery did not know existed. I uploaded everything. Once the progress bar hit 100%, I felt a fraction of the weight lift from my chest. If she burned this box, if she tore these papers to shreds, it would not matter. The truth was digital now, and it was immortal. I checked the time. It was 11 in the morning. Downstairs, the noise levels were rising. I could hear the clatter of pots and the high-pitched performative laughter of Avery on the phone, likely confirming the arrival time of the mayor's wife. This was my window. I hid the box back under the floorboard, smoothed the rug, and unlocked the door. I needed to go into the lion's den. I walked downstairs, keeping my footsteps light. The kitchen was a war zone of flour and expensive cheese. Avery was shouting at the catering staff who had finally arrived, instructing them on how to arrange the charcuterie board to maximize its visual impact. My father was nowhere to be seen. "Sabrina!" Avery barked without looking at me. "Don't just stand there. We need the linen tablecloths for the dining room. They are in your father's office, in the bottom drawer. Iron them before you put them out." I nodded, keeping my face blank. On it, I said, this was exactly the excuse I needed. I slipped into my father's home office and closed the door. It smelled of stale coffee and resignation. Dad used this room to hide from Avery, pretending to work on his accounts while he likely just stared at the wall. I went to the bottom drawer to get the tablecloths, but my eyes went to the top drawer, the one where he kept the pending bills. My father was disorganized by nature, a trait Avery loathed and constantly corrected, so he tended to shove things he did not want to deal with into this drawer. I pulled it open. It was a mess of invoices, flyers, and receipts. I dug through the pile, my heart hammering against my ribs. And then I found them. Buried beneath a past-due water bill and a flyer for a landscaping service were 2 envelopes. They were unopened. The paper was yellowed slightly, the corners bent. To Sabrina Erickson, from Harold Monroe. They were postmarked 2 years ago. My hands shook as I picked them up. I did not open them. I did not have the time. I shoved them into the waistband of my scrubs, hiding them under my shirt. Avery had intercepted my mail. She had stolen words from a dying man and shoved them in a drawer next to the trash. I grabbed the tablecloths and walked out, my face a mask of calm. I dropped the linens on the dining table. "I have to run to the hospital," I announced loud enough for Avery to hear over the mixer. "What?" Avery spun around, a knife in her hand. "You are joking. It is Christmas Day." "They just called." I lied, my voice steady. There was a massive pileup on the interstate. "They are calling in all off-duty staff. It is mandatory. I will be back before dinner." Avery looked at me, her eyes narrowing. She weighed the inconvenience of losing her scullery maid against the social clout of having a stepdaughter who was a hero first responder. "Fine," she snapped, "but be back by 5. And fix your face. The bruise is hideous." I walked out the door, got into my car, and drove. I did not go to the emergency room floor. I drove to the hospital parking lot, parked in the far corner where the snowplows piled the excess snow, and locked the doors. This was my sanctuary. I pulled out the letter from the box, the one I had photographed, and found the number for the First National Bank of Santa Fe. It was a holiday, but the letter mentioned a specific private wealth line that operated 24 hours of 7 days a week for high-value clients. I dialed the number, my breath fogging up the cold window. First National Bank, Private Client Services, a smooth voice answered. I am calling about a safety deposit box and a trust account, I said, my voice sounding stronger than I felt. The account holder is Harold Monroe. My name is Sabrina Erickson. There was a pause, the clicking of a keyboard. I have a flag on this file. Ms. Erickson. Mr. Monroe left specific instructions. He said you would call eventually. I need you to verify your identity. He left a passphrase. I looked at the letter again, at the very bottom, in small print. He had written, "The name of the pony I bought you when you were 6. It was a secret only he and I knew. Avery knew about the pony, but she never knew his name. She never asked. Barnaby, I whispered. There was a soft chime on the other end. Identity verified. Merry Christmas. Ms. Erickson, I can confirm that the safety deposit box is waiting for you. Regarding the trust account ending in 459, the current balance is $352,418.62. I closed my eyes. It was real. It was not a senile man's delusion. You have full access to these funds immediately, the banker continued. Would you like to transfer any amount today? Not yet, I said, tears pricking my eyes. Just keep it safe. I hung up and dialed the next number. Grace Holloway. The phone rang 4 times before a woman picked up. Her voice was sharp, professional, but tired. Grace Holloway speaking. Ms. Holloway, my name is Sabrina Erickson. I am Harold Monroe's granddaughter. The silence on the other end was absolute. Then, I heard a sharp intake of breath. Sabrina, Grace said, her tone shifting from professional to urgent. My God, I have been waiting for this call for 18 months. Where are you? Are you safe? I am in my car, I said. I found the box. You opened it? Grace asked. Yes, I have the key. I have the letter. Listen to me very carefully. Sabrina, Grace said, her voice steel. What you are holding is the only thing standing between that woman and your grandfather's legacy. Avery has been trying to get the Santa Fe property released from probate for a year. She claims you are unreachable, unstable, or uninterested. She presented an affidavit stating that you had verbally disclaimed your inheritance. I never did that, I cried. I know, Grace said soothingly. I knew she was lying. That is why I refused to proceed. She tried to fire me. She tried to bring in her own lawyer, a man named Davison, to bully the executor. That was why she held that sham will reading over Zoom. She knew if I was there, I would expose her. She muted the audio when I tried to object. Didn't she? She cut the video, I said, the memory flooding back. She said the internet died. Grace let out a dark chuckle. She is predictable. Sabrina, your grandfather tried to see you 5 times in the last 6 months of his life. He flew to Colorado twice. I felt the blood drain from my face. He came here? He did. He called the house. Avery answered. She told him you were working a double shift. She told him you had plans with friends. She told him you said, and I quote, I do not have time for him right now. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I never said that. I would never say that. I know, Grace said again. The last time he tried? He sat in a coffee shop in Ridgefield for 4 hours waiting for you. Avery told him you were on your way. When you did not show up, she called him and said you had decided to go to a party instead. That was the day he went to the bank and set up the secret trust. He realized he could not reach you physically, so he had to reach you financially. I stared out at the gray sky, putting the pieces together. The memories hit me like physical blows. Sabrina, can you pick up an extra shift tonight? Dad really needs the money for his blood pressure meds. That was the night Grandpa was in town. Sabrina, my friend canceled on me. Let's go for a spa day, just us girls. That was the day he was waiting at the coffee shop. She had not just used me. She had actively, surgically removed my grandfather from my life. She had painted me as a villain to a dying man to ensure he would feel abandoned enough to sign over his money, but she had underestimated how well he knew me. "Grace," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "She hit me this morning." "What?" Grace's voice dropped an octave. "She hit me, in the face, because I would not let her open the box." "Did you document it?" "I have a bruise." "Take photos," Grace commanded. "Now, date stamp them. Do not engage with her alone again. Sabrina, this changes things. This is not just fraud anymore. This is assault. We have leverage. I am going to burn her down." "Good," Grace said. "I am in Denver visiting my sister for the holidays. I can be in Ridgefield in 2 hours." "No," I said, a plan forming in my mind. "Not yet. Come to dinner. 7 o'clock. I hung up. My hands were steady now. The cold in the car felt refreshing, sharp and clarifying. I had one more thing to check. I opened the email app on my phone. I went to the trash folder, then to the archive, then to the blocked sender list. There it was. Harold, Monroe@gmail.com, blocked on my phone. I unblocked it. I searched his email address in my inbox. Nothing. I searched in the trash. Nothing. I searched in the permanently deleted recovery folder, a feature most people, including Avery, did not know existed or how to clear properly. And there they were, dozens of them. Subject, Christmas gift. Subject, please call me. Subject, are you angry with me? Subject, your mother would be so proud. I opened the one titled, For Sabrina Only, my Christmas gift to you. It was dated December 24th of last year. My dear Sabrina, I know you are busy, and I respect that you need your space, but please, just click this link. It is a video I made for you, just in case. She had deleted it. She had deleted his last words to me before I could even see them. I sat in the parking lot and screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw. I screamed for the years I had lost, for the lies I had believed, and for the man who had died thinking I was too busy for him. Then, I stopped. I wiped my face. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The bruise on my cheek was darkening, turning a sickly purple. It looked like war paint. I started the car. I was going back to the house. I was going to peel her potatoes. I was going to set her table. I was going to smile at her guests. And then, I was going to destroy her. When I walked back into the house, the air was thick with the smell of roasting turkey and the sharp, chemical scent of heavy-duty hairspray. The atmosphere had shifted from organized chaos to a frantic, high-wire tension. In the hour I had been gone, Avery had ramped up the pressure. The catering staff moved with their heads down, avoiding eye contact, and my father was pacing the living room, adjusting ornaments on the tree that were already perfectly straight. Avery was in the hallway, holding a clipboard. When she saw me, her eyes darted immediately to the side of my face. I had applied a layer of concealer, but the swelling was undeniable. A faint purple shadow was blooming along my cheekbone. "You are back," she said, not looking me in the eye. "The napkins. Did you iron them?" "They are on the table," I said, my voice flat. "Good. Now, I need you to go into the basement and bring up the extra folding chairs. We have 2 unexpected guests coming." I looked at her. The old Sabrina, the one from yesterday, would have dropped her bag and run downstairs immediately, but I was not that person anymore. I could feel the cold metal of the safety deposit key against my skin, tucked inside my bra. It was a reminder that the power dynamic had shifted, even if she did not know it yet. "I will get them in a moment," I said. "I need to change out of my scrubs first, and I need to take some ibuprofen. My head is pounding." Avery blinked. She looked at me as if the toaster had just started speaking French. I did not wait for her response. I walked past her and went up the stairs. I could feel her eyes boring into my back, analyzing this new, quiet resistance. She was sensing a change in the wind, and like any predator, she was calculating how to adapt. 10 minutes later, I was in my attic room, buttoning up a dark green dress that I had bought 3 years ago. There was a knock on the door. It was not the tentative knock of my father. It was the sharp, authoritative rap of Avery. "Come in," I said. Avery entered. She had changed into a silver cocktail dress that looked like liquid money. In her hand, she held a plastic bag filled with ice, wrapped in a silk handkerchief. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her expression shifting into a mask of pained concern. "I brought you this," she said, holding out the ice, "for your face." I looked at the ice, then at her. "Thank you," I said dryly. She walked over and sat on the edge of my bed, invading my space. She sighed, a long, tragic sound. "Sabrina, look," she began, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "About this morning, I want you to know that I am under a lot of pressure. You know how important this party is for your father's image. When you defied me like that, in front of him, I just snapped. It is not like me. You know that." I stared at her. It was a masterclass in non-apology. She had managed to blame me, the victim, within 3 sentences. "You hit me, Avery," I said, my voice steady. "You slapped a 28-year-old woman in the face because I wanted to open a gift from my grandfather." Avery rolled her eyes, a quick, dismissive gesture. "Oh, stop being so dramatic. It was a tap. I was trying to get your attention. You were being hysterical." "I was not hysterical," I said. "I was calm. And I am telling you now, Avery, do not ever touch me again." The air in the room went cold. Avery's mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the pure, unadulterated malice beneath. Then she smiled. It was a terrifying expression. "You know, Sabrina," she said softly, standing up and smoothing her dress, "I think you are forgetting something. You live in my house. You eat my food. You use my electricity. Most stepmothers would have kicked a girl your age out years ago. I have given you a home. I have given you a family. And this is how you repay me? With attitude? With threats?" "I pay rent, Avery," I reminded her. "A pittance," she spat back. "It barely covers the water bill. You are lucky we are so generous. But honestly, I am worried about you. You are acting erratic." She let the word hang in the air, heavy with implication. "Erratic?" I asked. "Yes, erratic. Obsessing over that box, imagining things about your grandfather. I think the night shifts are finally getting to you. You look unhinged, darling." She dropped the ice pack on my bed, turned on her heel, and walked out. I stood there, shaking not with fear, but with fury. She was planting the seeds. I could see it now. She was setting the stage. I pressed the ice to my cheek and opened my door just a crack. I needed to know what she was doing. The acoustics of the house were strange. The attic stairwell acted like a funnel, amplifying sounds from the hallway below. I heard Avery on the phone. Her voice was bright, fake, and loud. "Linda, darling, how are you? Merry Christmas." Yes. We are so excited to see you tonight." I froze. Linda was the chief nursing officer at my hospital. She was on the board of directors. Avery had met her once at a charity gala and had been name-dropping her ever since. "Listen, Linda," Avery continued, her voice dropping to a tone of hushed concern. "I actually wanted to give you a little heads up about Sabrina. Yes, she is not herself today. She just came off a brutal shift. And honestly, I think she is having a bit of a breakdown. She is talking nonsense about her grandfather, shouting at her father. It is quite scary. I just wanted you to know, in case she says anything strange at work next week, we are thinking of getting her some help." My blood ran cold. She was going for my job. She was painting me as mentally unstable to my superior. If I filed a complaint about the abuse, Linda would now view it through the lens of Sabrina is having a breakdown. I gripped the doorframe. This was not just a family spat. This was a calculated destruction of my credibility. I pulled out my phone. I had a notification from Instagram. It was from Zoe. I clicked on it. It was a story, posted 20 minutes ago from California. It was a selfie of Zoe looking sad with a pouty face, captioned, "Sending love to my mom today." It is so hard dealing with toxic family members who just want to create drama on Christmas. Some people just do not know how to be grateful. Stay strong, mom family drama. My phone buzzed again, a text from my friend Jessica. "Hey Sab, just saw Zoe's story. Is everything okay? She makes it sound like you guys are fighting." And another from my cousin on my mom's side, "Sabrina, are you okay?" Avery posted on Facebook asking for prayers for peace in the home and healing for troubled minds. What is going on? I felt a wave of nausea. She was moving fast. She was isolating me. She was controlling the narrative before I even had a chance to speak to the outside world. I was the ungrateful, unstable daughter ruining Christmas. To them, Avery was the saintly stepmother trying to hold it all together. I crept further down the stairs, needing to hear more. Avery was in the kitchen now, talking to my father. "Dan, we have to be realistic," she was saying. Her voice was firm, reasonable. "She is not well. Did you see her eyes? She is obsessed with that money. She thinks Harold left her a fortune. It is delusional." Dan mumbled something I could not hear. "I am serious. Dan," Avery pressed. "I spoke to Pastor Nolan just now. I asked him to pray for us. I told him Sabrina is threatening to sue the family because she thinks we stole her inheritance." He was shocked. He said greed is a terrible sin. "But Dan, if she starts spreading these lies, it could ruin your reputation. We might need to have her evaluated." "Evaluated?" Dan asked, his voice sounding weak. "Like a doctor?" "Yes, a psychiatric evaluation, an involuntary hold, if necessary, just for 48 hours. To calm her down, if she makes a scene tonight, we might not have a choice. It is for her own good." I pressed my hand over my mouth to stop a gasp. She was talking about having me committed. She was planning to use the legal system to silence me by claiming I was insane. If I was labeled mentally unstable, my testimony about the will, the theft, and the abuse would be worthless. No one would believe the crazy girl over the upstanding community pillars. I backed up slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I needed to get back to the attic. I needed to think. But then, the phone rang again. Avery picked it up. "Mitchell!" she exclaimed. Her tone changed instantly. It was no longer the concerned mother. It was the desperate conspirator. I stopped. Mitchell was their financial advisor. "Yes, I know it is Christmas," she hissed. "I am sorry, but I need to know if the paperwork went through." There was a pause. "What do you mean there is a hold?" Avery's voice rose, sharp and panicked. "We need that refinancing approved by Tuesday. Mitchell, the balloon payment on the business loan is due on the 1st. If we do not get the equity out of the house, we are underwater." Another pause. "No, Dan does not know the extent of it, and he does not need to. Just get it done. Listen, Harold's probate is still stuck, but I am handling the girl. She will not be a problem. I am going to make sure she is incapacitated, if I have to. Just push the mortgage through. I cannot lose this house. Mitchell, it is all we have left." She hung up. I stood in the shadows of the stairwell, the pieces finally clicking into a terrifying picture. They were broke. The perfect life, the expensive parties, the renovations, Zoe's tuition, it was all a facade. They were drowning in debt. That was why they needed Grandpa's money so badly. That was why Avery had stolen from him while he was alive. And now, they were trying to remortgage the house that, according to the real will, was about to be heavily contested. If I claimed my inheritance, if I exposed the fraud, they would lose everything. They would be bankrupt. Avery was not just being mean. She was fighting for her survival. She was a cornered animal, and she was willing to destroy my life, my career, and my sanity to keep her secret. I realized then that my silence would not save me. Being good would not save me. If I went downstairs and played the role of the dutiful daughter, she would still destroy me because I was a liability. She needed me discredited. She needed me gone. I turned and walked back up to the attic, my steps silent. I went into my room and locked the door. I looked at myself in the mirror. The green dress, the bruise, the terrified eyes. You are not crazy, I whispered to my reflection. You are not unstable. You are a nurse. You deal with trauma every day. This is just another code blue. I picked up my phone. I saw the texts from my friends, the notifications from Zoe's post. I did not reply to any of them. I did not defend myself. Not yet. Let them talk. Let them think I was the villain. Let Avery think she had successfully isolated me. Let her think I was cowering up here, afraid of my own shadow. I checked the time. It was 5 p.m. The guests would be arriving in 2 hours. Grace Holloway would be arriving in 2 hours. I sat down on the bed and focused on my breathing. In, out, in, out. Avery was building a cage for me, constructed of lies and social pressure. She thought she had locked the door. She did not know I had the key to the demolition truck. I sat in the corner booth of a 24-hour diner 3 blocks from the hospital, my hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee that had gone cold 10 minutes ago. Across from me sat Grace Holloway. She was nothing like the polished, corporate lawyer Avery had tried to shove down our throats during the Zoom call. Grace was in her 60s, with steel gray hair cut into a sharp bob and eyes that looked like they could spot a lie from across a courtroom. She was wearing a thick wool coat over a festive sweater, having clearly left her own family gathering to meet me. But she did not look annoyed. She looked like a general reviewing a battle plan. We had about 40 minutes before I had to return to the house to maintain the charade of my hospital shift, and we were using every second of it. On the Formica table between us lay the evidence, the letter from Grandpa Harold, the photocopy of the real will, and the bank statements I had printed out at the hospital library earlier. Grace read through them in silence, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. Occasionally, she would hum a low note of approval or shake her head in disgust. "This is airtight. Sabrina," she said, tapping a manicured fingernail on the bank ledger. Harold was meticulous. He knew exactly what they were doing. This log of withdrawals matched against Avery's shopping trips. It establishes a pattern of elder financial abuse that predates his death. It gives us grounds to challenge everything she has done as executor. She looked up at me, and her gaze softened as it landed on my cheek. The concealer I had applied was starting to fade, revealing the darkening bruise underneath. "But right now, I am less concerned about the money and more concerned about you," she said, her voice dropping to a serious, hushed tone. "You are going back into that house. You are walking back into a cage with a tiger that knows it is about to be cornered." "I can handle Avery," I said, though my voice lacked the conviction I wanted it to have. "No, you cannot," Grace corrected me firmly. "Not physically, and not if she controls the narrative. Listen to me, Sabrina. We are going to win the war, but you need to survive the battle. Your priority right now is personal safety and documentation. Do not be a hero. Be a witness." She reached into her bag and pulled out a notepad. Scribbling instructions. "First," she said, "document that injury. Go to the bathroom right now and take clear photos of your face from multiple angles. Upload them to a secure server immediately. If she touches you again, you leave. I do not care about the plan. You leave and you call the police. Do you understand?" I nodded. "I understand." "Second," Grace continued, "do not engage with her alone. Avery is a manipulator. She will try to bait you. She will try to get you to scream or throw something so she can claim you are the aggressor. If you are in a room with her, make sure the door is open. If she starts talking about money or the will, record it. Does your phone have a voice memo app?" "Yes," I said. "Keep it running in your pocket," she advised, "especially when she plays the victim. I want to hear her say things like, 'You owe me,' or 'I will ruin you,' in a custody battle for an estate. Character is everything. If we can prove she is abusive and coercive, we dismantle her claim that she was acting in Harold's best interest." I took a deep breath. I had already started doing this, instinctively, but hearing Grace validate it made me feel less like a sneak and more like a strategist. I have a friend at the hospital. I said, Jenna. She is an ER nurse too. Good, Grace said. Bring her in. Tell her everything. If Avery tries to paint you as mentally unstable, and she will. Sabrina, that is the oldest trick in the book. You need credible professionals who can vouch for your sanity. I spent the next 15 minutes in the diner bathroom, taking unflattering, stark photos of my face under the harsh fluorescent lights. It was humiliating to see the imprint of my stepmother's hand on my skin. But I forced myself to look. This was not just pain, it was ammunition. After I left the diner, I sat in my car and called Jenna. She answered on the second ring, the background noise of the hospital cafeteria clattering behind her. Merry Christmas, babe, Jenna said cheerfully. Please tell me you are not actually coming in. I saw your name on the roster, but I thought you swapped. I am not coming in, I said, keeping my voice low, but I need a favor, a big one. I told her everything. I told her about the box, the letter, the money in Santa Fe and the slap. I told her about Avery's plan to have me evaluated. Jenna went silent for a long time, and when she spoke again, her voice was cold with a protective fury. If that woman tries to say you are crazy, I will testify under oath that you are the most level-headed nurse on the floor, Jenna said. I have seen you run a trauma code on a pediatric arrest without blinking. I will get Dr. Phillips to sign a character reference, too. We have your back. Sab, send me the photos. Send me the files. If your phone accidentally breaks, I want copies. Thank you, I whispered, feeling a lump form in my throat. One more thing, Jenna added. You need a paper trail that proves you are sane before she accuses you of being crazy. Book a session with a therapist, not a hospital one, someone independent. I hung up and immediately searched for Dr. Caleb Ross. He was a private practice psychologist in Denver who specialized in family trauma. His website had an online booking portal. I scheduled an intake appointment for the 26th of December at 9 in the morning. In the notes section, I wrote, seeking documentation of mental stability in response to family threats of involuntary commitment. It was a defensive move, a shield raised against the mud Avery was preparing to sling. By the time she tried to drag me to a doctor, I would already have a clean bill of health from a neutral third party. I sat in the cold car, the engine idling, and looked at the bank app on my phone. $352,000. It was just a number on a screen, but it represented options. It represented a door opening where there had been only a wall. I transferred $5,000 from the trust account to a new checking account I had opened online 10 minutes prior, an account at a completely different bank than the one Dan and Avery used. I labeled the transfer Freedom Fund. Then, I opened a rental app. I searched for apartments near the hospital. Not the cheapest ones. Not the basement studios with mold issues that I used to look at and dream about. I looked at one-bedroom apartments with balconies and security systems. I found one 3 blocks from the ER. It had hardwood floors and a view of the mountains. It was available immediately. I did not sign the lease yet, but I saved the listing. I mentally moved my furniture in. I imagined waking up there, making coffee in a kitchen where no one would yell at me, where no one would demand I peel potatoes or hide my existence. It was a psychological severance. I was no longer a resident of the Monroe house. I was a guest who was just waiting for her ride. I drove back to the house with Grace's final instructions ringing in my ears. The party is the stage. Sabrina, she had said, leaning across the table, her eyes gleaming. Avery loves an audience. She thinks the guests are there to admire her perfect life. We are going to use them as a jury. I will come at 7. I will bring the original documents. You just make sure everyone is in that living room. What if she kicks you out? I had asked. She can try. Grace had smiled. But I am a lawyer, and I'm carrying a will that names you the owner of the house's contents. Technically, she is the guest. Now, back in the attic, I checked my watch. It was 6 in the evening. The guests would be arriving in an hour. I could hear Avery downstairs, her voice shrill as she berated the catering staff about the placement of the shrimp cocktail. I changed into the green dress, checking my appearance in the mirror. The bruise was hidden, but I knew it was there. I slipped my phone into the pocket of the dress and turned on the voice recorder app. I tested it, whispering testing, 1, 2, 3, and watched the little red waveform dance. It was sensitive enough to pick up a whisper across the room. I unlocked the wooden box one last time. I took out the USB drive. It sat in the palm of my hand, small and silver. Play when you are ready. I hesitated. Everything else in the box had been a tool, a key, a letter, a bank statement. But this was him. This was his voice, his face. I wanted to plug it into my laptop. I wanted to see him one last time before the chaos of the evening began. I wanted to hear him tell me he loved me. But my hand hovered over the laptop port. I was afraid. I was afraid that if I saw him, if I saw the kindness in his eyes, I would break down. I would lose the cold, sharp edge of anger that was holding me together. I needed to be angry tonight. I needed to be steel. If I softened, if I started crying for the grandfather I had lost, Avery would smell the weakness and tear me apart. I curled my fingers around the drive. No, not yet. This was my ace in the hole. This was the final blow. I would not watch it alone in the dark. I would let him speak when it mattered most. I put the USB drive in my other pocket, opposite the phone. I stood up and smoothed my dress. I was terrified. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. But for the first time in my life, I was not going downstairs to serve. I was going downstairs to collect. I unlocked the attic door and stepped out onto the landing. The smell of pine and expensive perfume drifted up from the foyer. The doorbell rang. The first guests were here. Let the show begin. I sat on the edge of my bed in the darkening attic, the only light coming from the glow of my laptop screen. Downstairs, the doorbell had just rung for the first time, signaling the arrival of the guests, but I had locked my door. I had bought myself 20 minutes of silence before I had to descend into the madness. I needed to see him. I needed to hear him. I held the silver USB drive in my hand. It was cold, small, and terrifying. I plugged it into the side of the laptop. The computer hummed. Reading the drive, a window popped up with a single file. It was a video file, titled simply, "For Sabrina, Christmas." My finger hovered over the trackpad. I was shaking again, but not from fear of Avery this time. I was afraid of the grief. I was afraid that seeing his face would break the hard shell of anger I had constructed to survive the day. If I cried now, I was not sure I could stop, but Grace was right. We needed ammunition, and Grandpa Harold had never been one to waste a move. I clicked play. The screen flickered black for a second, and then, there he was. Grandpa Harold was sitting in his favorite worn leather armchair in the study of his Santa Fe house. He was wearing his red cardigan, the one with the suede patches on the elbows that I used to tease him about. Next to him, on a small side table, was a miniature artificial Christmas tree with blinking lights. He looked thinner than I remembered, his skin papery, but his eyes, those sharp, blue eyes, were clear and focused. He leaned forward, adjusting the camera lens slightly, his hand shaking just a bit. "Is this thing on?" he muttered to himself. "Ah, the little red light. Good." He sat back, took a deep breath, and looked directly into the lens. It felt like he was looking right into my soul across the barrier of time and death. "Hello, Sabrina," he said. His voice was raspy, but it had that familiar warmth that smelled of tobacco and peppermints. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle a sob. Hearing his voice was like a physical blow to the chest, but it was a good pain. It was the pain of thawing out after being frozen for 3 years. "If you are watching this," Grandpa continued, clasping his hands in his lap, "it means I am gone, and it means that my suspicions were correct. It means that every other method I tried to use to reach you, the letters, the emails, the phone calls, the trips to Colorado, failed. It means they successfully built a wall between us." He paused, and his expression hardened. The grandfatherly warmth evaporated, replaced by the steely look of the man who had built a business empire from nothing. "I want you to know something. Sabrina, I never forgot you. Not for a second. And I was never senile. That was a story Avery concocted to discredit anything I might say to you. He leaned in closer to the camera. I saw her. Sabrina. I saw who she really was years ago. I remember the day I decided to write the new will. It was during that Thanksgiving visit. The last one I made to your house before things got complicated. I was supposed to be napping in the guest room, but I was awake. I heard Avery on the phone in the hallway. She was talking to one of her friends. I wrote down exactly what she said because I wanted to remember why I had to do what I did. He pulled a small notepad from his pocket and put on his reading glasses. She said, "The old man is tighter with money than I thought, but do not worry, I have Sabrina handled. She is housebroken. She is like a puppy. If you kick her, she cowers. But if you throw her a crumb of affection or guilt, she will do whatever you want. She is the perfect free labor." The air in the attic seemed to vanish. I sat frozen, staring at the screen. Housebroken, like a puppy. I felt a surge of nausea. That was how she saw me, not as a daughter, not even as an enemy, but as a domesticated animal to be used and managed. When I heard that, Grandpa said, taking off his glasses, I wanted to walk out there and tear the house down, but I knew if I did, she would just tighten the leash. She would ban me from seeing you. She would tell you I was crazy. So, I decided to play the long game. I decided to ensure that the puppy would eventually have the teeth of a wolf. He smiled then, a dry, mischievous smile. The will you have in your possession, the one Grace Holloway is guarding, is the only valid one. I have left you the house, the land, and the portfolio, but there is a condition. Sabrina, you will see it in the paperwork. You only get full access to the estate if you physically move out of that house and sever financial ties with Dan and Avery. He pointed a finger at the camera. I am not giving you money to make your prison more comfortable. Sabrina, I am giving you money to blow the prison doors off. If you stay there, if you use a dime of this to pay their debts, the money goes to the Red Cross. I love you too much to fund your abuse. He sat back again, looking tired now. The effort of the speech was draining him. I know you. Sabby, I know you are kind. I know you love your father. But Dan? Dan made his choice. He chose his peace over your protection. You do not owe him your life. He took a sip of water from a glass on the table. Now for the fun part, he said, his eyes twinkling. If you are watching this, it is likely Christmas. Avery loves a holiday. She loves a stage. If you decide to stand up for yourself, and I pray to God you do it when she feels the most secure. Do it when she thinks she has won. Do it. Say, on Christmas morning? Or perhaps during that fancy dinner she always throws? He winked. He actually winked at the camera. Give them hell, kiddo. I will be watching from the cheap seats. The screen went black. I sat there for a long time, the silence of the attic ringing in my ears. The tears were flowing freely now, hot and fast, but I did not wipe them away. I let them fall. I felt a strange sensation spreading through my chest. It was not grief. It was power. I was not alone. I had never been alone, even from the grave. He was fighting for me. He had orchestrated this whole thing, the box, the timing, the hidden account, just to give me this moment. He had handed me a loaded gun and told me to pull the trigger. Housebroken. I closed the laptop, but then opened it again immediately. I needed to act. The emotion was fuel, but now I needed the logistics. I opened my email and attached the video file. I typed in Grace's email address. My fingers flew across the keys. Grace, watching this now, it proves he was sound of mind. It proves he knew about the abuse. Can we use this tonight? I hit send. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Grace. I just watched it. Her text read, Sabrina, this is gold. This is not just evidence of his capacity. It is a character witness statement against Avery. It dismantles her benevolent stepmother act completely. We are definitely using this. I typed back, how? Grace replied, does the living room TV have an HDMI input or screen mirroring? Yes, I wrote, Dad bought a huge smart TV for Avery's movie nights. It is connected to the Wi-Fi. Perfect, Grace wrote. When I arrive, I will create a distraction with the paperwork. You get control of the screen. We play it before I read the will. Let the dead man speak first. It will carry more weight than any legal document. I took a deep breath. It was a high-risk move. If Avery realized what we were doing, she would cut the power. She would scream. She would try to smash the TV. I will make sure it plays, I promised. I forwarded the video file to 2 more people. First, to Jenna. Backup. I texted, if anything happens to my phone or laptop, you have the original. Also, show this to Dr. Phillips. Ask him if a man speaking this clearly looks senile to him. Jenna replied instantly with a row of fire emojis. Downloaded and saved to 3 different drives. This guy is a legend. Go get them. Sab. Then, I sent it to the email address Dr. Caleb Ross had provided in his automated booking confirmation. I added a note. Dr. Ross, please keep this on file as part of my intake background. This is the delusion my family claims I am suffering from. I was building a fortress of evidence. Every step I took was documented, backed up, and witnessed. I closed the laptop and put the USB drive back in my pocket, opposite my phone, which was still recording audio. I stood up and walked to the mirror. The girl looking back at me was wearing a green dress and a bruise on her cheek. But her eyes were different. They were Harold Monroe's eyes. She is like a puppy. I bared my teeth at the mirror. They were white and sharp. I unlocked the attic door. The noise from downstairs was loud now. I could hear jazz music, the clinking of glasses, and the low hum of conversation. The guests had arrived. The stage was set. Avery was down there, playing the role of the perfect hostess, holding court, telling stories about how wonderful her life was. She thought she was the director of this play. She thought I was just a prop. I walked out onto the landing and looked down the spiral staircase. I could see the top of Avery's blonde head as she moved through the crowd. It was time to go down. It was time to be the wolf. The timeline in my head shifted back a few hours, before the green dress, before the guests arrived. There was the final battle in the kitchen. It was the moment that turned my defense into an offense. The moment I stopped protecting myself and started documenting the crime. It was early afternoon on Christmas Day. I had just returned from my shift at the hospital, which had actually been my war council with Grace Holloway at the diner. I walked into the house, and the heat of the kitchen hit me like a physical wall. The air smelled of roasting meat and stress. Avery was standing by the island, surrounded by a chaotic spread of ingredients. She looked like a general whose army had deserted her. When she saw me, her eyes lit up, not with affection, but with the relief of a slave driver seeing a fresh pair of hands. "There you are," she snapped, wiping flour from her hands onto a custom-embroidered apron. "You took long enough. I hope you are ready to work. Sabrina, the caterers messed up the appetizers, and I need you to salvage this." She shoved a laminated list into my chest. "Here is the plan," she said, her voice high and tight. "We are doing a 7-course sit-down dinner. I need you to finish the glaze for the ham, prep the asparagus, and set the dining table for 14 people. And do not just throw the silverware down. I want the crystal glasses, the ones your grandmother bought in Italy, and you will be serving the wine tonight because the bartender canceled." I looked at the list. It was a schedule for a servant, not a family member. I took a deep breath. I could feel the cold metal of the safety deposit key pressing against my skin under my clothes. I could feel the weight of the phone in my pocket. "No," I said. The kitchen went silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the bubbling of a pot on the stove. Avery stopped chopping. She turned to me slowly, the knife still in her hand. "Excuse me?" She laughed. A short, sharp sound. "I must have heard you wrong, because it sounded like you just said no to me on Christmas Day." I did. I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs, "I am not serving the wine. Avery, I am not cooking the 7 courses. I am a guest in this house, just like everyone else coming tonight. I will be eating dinner at the table with you and Dad. Avery put the knife down. The smile dropped from her face, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated venom. She walked around the island, her heels clicking on the tile like gunshots. "Who do you think you are?" she hissed, stopping inches from my face. "You think because you worked one shift today you are special? You live here on my charity. You exist in this house because I allow it." I stepped back, creating space. I moved toward the counter where a large decorative vase filled with holly branches stood. It was the perfect angle. It faced the main workspace and the entrance to the hallway. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I did not look at it. I had practiced this motion a dozen times in the car. Thumb on the side button, double tap, swipe left, record. I leaned the phone against the base of the vase, the camera lens facing out, hidden by a spray of pine needles, but with a clear view of Avery and me. The little red light on the screen blinked once, a silent eye witnessing the scene. "I am not asking for charity. Avery," I said, speaking clearly for the microphone. "I pay rent. I contribute. And I have the right to spend Christmas with my father without being treated like hired help." "Don't you dare talk to me about rights!" Avery screamed. Her control was snapping. The stress of the mortgage, the probate, the lies, it was all boiling over. She lunged forward and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was iron hard, her fingernails digging into my skin. She yanked me away from the counter, pulling me into the center of the room. "You ungrateful little parasite," she shouted, shaking my arm. "I should have thrown you out on the street the day your mother died. You are nothing. You are a burden." "Let go of me," I yelled, making sure my voice carried to the phone. "You are hurting me." Avery did not let go. She shoved me backward. I stumbled, my back hitting the wall hard. The impact knocked the wind out of me. Before I could regain my balance, she was on me, pinning me against the plaster with her body. She raised her hand, her palm open, ready to strike the same cheek she had bruised this morning. I flinched, but I did not close my eyes. I looked right at her. "You have no right to hit me," I said, my voice shaking but loud. "This is assault." Avery laughed. It was a manic, terrifying sound. "Assault?" she sneered, leaning in so close I could smell the champagne on her breath. "Who is going to believe you? You are the crazy daughter. You are the unstable nurse who thinks her dead grandfather is talking to her." She lowered her hand, but she did not step back. She grabbed my chin, squeezing it hard, forcing me to look at her. "Listen to me, Sabrina," she whispered, her voice a low growl. "If you try to ruin tonight, if you say one word about the will or the money in front of my guests, I will destroy you. I will call the hospital board. I will tell them you are stealing drugs. I will tell them you are hallucinating. I will have you committed so fast your head will spin." I stared at her, memorizing the hate in her eyes. "Is that a threat?" I asked. "It is a promise," she spat. "I feed you. I house you. I own you. I can do whatever I want with you. I own you." She had said it. She had said the magic words. At that moment, the door from the living room swung open. My father, Dan Monroe, walked in. He was holding a string of tangled Christmas lights, looking bewildered. "What is going on in here?" he asked, looking from Avery to me. I could hear shouting all the way in the garage. Avery released me instantly. She stepped back, smoothing her apron, her face transforming in a split second from demonic rage to frazzled exhaustion. "Oh, Dan," she cried, her voice trembling with fake tears. "I am just at my wit's end. I asked Sabrina for a little help with the potatoes, and she just exploded at me. She started screaming that she hates this family and wants to ruin the party." I stood against the wall, rubbing my wrist where her nails had left crescent-shaped indentations. I looked at my father. He was looking at me, his eyes filled with that familiar mix of disappointment and fatigue. "Sabrina, please," he sighed. "Avery is working so hard. Can you just apologize and help her? It is Christmas." I looked at him, and for the first time in 28 years, I felt absolutely nothing. The little girl who wanted her daddy to save her finally died. In her place stood a woman who knew she was the only one who could save herself. She hit me. "Dad," I said quietly. "She shoved me into the wall. She threatened to have me fired." Dan flinched. He looked at Avery, then back at me. He saw the red marks on my wrist. He saw the way I was holding myself, but he chose the path of least resistance. "Stop it, Sabrina," he muttered, turning away to fiddle with the lights. "You are exaggerating. Avery loves you. Just stop causing trouble." The indifference cut deeper than Avery's nails ever could. He knew. He had always known. He just did not care enough to stop it. I walked over to the counter. I picked up my phone. I stopped the recording. The video file saved to my camera roll. I turned to face them. Avery was back at the island, chopping vegetables with aggressive force, pretending I did not exist. Dad was walking out the door, retreating to his safe zone. "I am not cooking," I said. My voice was not loud, but it stopped Dan in the doorway. I walked over to the corner of the kitchen where I had left the wooden box. I had brought it down with me because I refused to leave it unguarded in the attic. I picked it up, hugging it to my chest like a shield. "Tonight," I continued, looking straight at Avery's back, "I am going to sit at that table, and before we eat, we are going to have a conversation. In front of everyone. We are going to talk about what you just did. We are going to talk about what you did to Grandpa." Avery did not turn around. She just laughed, a dismissive scoff. "Go ahead," she said, waving a knife in the air without looking. "Tell your little stories. See who believes you. You are just a pathetic little girl with a bruised ego." She did not know. She did not know that the pathetic little girl had a high-definition video of her confessing to abuse and coercion. She did not know that the crazy nurse had a lawyer and a forensic psychologist on speed dial. I walked out of the kitchen. I did not run. I walked slowly, deliberately, past my father who refused to meet my eyes. I went straight to the downstairs powder room and locked the door. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. I opened the video file. I watched the first 10 seconds. The image was slightly tilted, framed by pine needles, but the audio was crystal clear. "I feed you, I house you, I own you." It was perfect. It was damning. I hit the share button. I sent it to Grace Holloway with the caption, "She just gave us everything we need." I sent it to Jenna with the caption, "If I do not make it out of here tonight, this is why." I sent it to Dr. Caleb Ross with the caption, "Documentation of abusive environment and threats of false imprisonment." Then, I uploaded it to my secure cloud storage. I watched the progress bar. 20%, 50%, 100%. Upload complete. I slumped against the bathroom door. Sliding down until I hit the cold tile floor, I hugged the wooden box to my knees. The adrenaline was starting to crash, leaving me feeling hollow and nauseous. My wrist throbbed. My back ached where I had hit the wall. But I was not crying. I looked at the box. Inside was the letter from a man who had loved me. Inside was the USB drive with the truth. And now, in the cloud, was the proof that justified everything I was about to do. I checked the time. It was 5 in the afternoon. The guests would be here in 2 hours. I stood up. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. The bruise on my cheek was a badge of honor now. I would not cover it up with makeup tonight. I wanted them to see it. I wanted the mayor's wife to see it. I wanted the pastor to see it. I unlocked the bathroom door and walked toward the stairs. The house was filling with the smell of the dinner I refused to cook. The trap was set. The players were in position. Avery thought she was preparing for a coronation. She did not know she was preparing for an execution. And I was the one holding the axe. The dining room was a masterpiece of deception. The chandelier was dimmed to a golden glow, casting soft light over the crystal stemware and the holly centerpieces that ran the length of the mahogany table. 14 people sat around it, their faces flushed with wine and the warmth of the fireplace. To an outsider, it looked like a scene from a holiday magazine. To me, it felt like a courtroom where the jury was already seated, unaware that the trial was about to begin. I sat at the far end of the table, opposite my father. I was wearing the green dress. and I had deliberately swept my hair back. The bruise on my cheek was visible, a dark smudge against my pale skin. Avery had tried to hand me her concealer stick before the guests arrived, hissing that I looked like a street brawler, but I had dropped it into the trash can without breaking eye contact. The guests were the who is who of Avery's carefully curated social circle. To my right sat Mitchell, the financial advisor, a man with a shiny suit and a nervous laugh, who had been helping Avery structure the refinancing of the house. Across from him were the Harrisons, the wealthy neighbors whose approval Avery craved like oxygen. At the head of the table, flanking Avery, were Pastor Nolan and his wife, and next to them was Mr. Henderson, my father's boss, a man who prided himself on family values. Avery was in her element. She held her wineglass by the stem, gesturing gracefully as she recounted a story about her charity work. "It is exhausting," she said with a modest sigh, looking around the table. "But when you see the look on those children's faces, it makes it all worth it. Just like today. I have been in the kitchen since 4 a.m, making sure everything was perfect for you all." She turned her smile toward me, a smile that did not reach her cold, hard eyes. "And of course, our dear Sabrina helped," she lied smoothly. Even though she was working a grueling shift at the hospital and came home simply exhausted, she still managed to peel the potatoes. "She is such a dedicated little helper. Aren't you, darling?" A murmur of approval went around the table. "Such a hard worker," Mrs. Harrison cooed. "You are lucky to have a stepdaughter who pitches in." "Avery, most young people these days just want to be served." I gripped my fork, my knuckles turning white. She was stealing my labor even as she insulted me. She was painting me as the dutiful, silent assistant to her grand production. "Actually," I began, my voice cutting through the low hum of conversation. Avery's head snapped toward me, a warning flash in her eyes. "I did not cook tonight," I said clearly. "Avery did it all. I decided to take the night off to enjoy the company." The table went quiet for a beat. It was a small rebellion, but it disrupted her narrative. Avery let out a tight, high-pitched laugh. "Oh, she is just being modest," Avery insisted, reaching out to pat my hand, her nails digging into my skin for a second before pulling away. "She is delirious from lack of sleep. Ignore her." Just as the servers, hired at the last minute to replace me, began to bring out the prime rib, the doorbell rang. It was a loud, jarring sound that echoed through the house. Avery frowned. "Who on earth could that be at this hour?" she muttered, looking at Dan. "We are not expecting anyone else, are we?" Dan shook his head, looking up from his plate where he had been staring intently at his green beans. "No, I do not think so." "I will get it," I said, standing up before Avery could protest. I walked to the foyer, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs. I opened the heavy oak door. A gust of snowy wind blew in, followed by Grace Holloway. She looked magnificent. She was wearing a heavy wool coat dusted with fresh snow, and she carried a thick leather briefcase in one hand and a large manila envelope in the other. She did not look like a party guest. She looked like an executioner. "Good evening," Grace said, stepping inside and stamping the snow off her boots. "I believe I'm just in time for the main course." I led her into the dining room. The conversation stopped instantly. 14 pairs of eyes turned to stare at the stranger in the coat. Avery stood up, her napkin falling to the floor, her face drained of color, leaving her rouge standing out like clown paint. She recognized Grace instantly. She remembered the lawyer who had refused to let her steal the estate 2 years ago. "You," Avery whispered, her voice barely audible. "What are you doing here? You are not welcome in this house." Grace smiled, a sharp, shark-like expression. She walked to the head of the table and placed the heavy briefcase on the sideboard with a solid thud. "Merry Christmas, everyone," Grace announced, her voice projecting like she was in a courtroom. "I apologize for the interruption. My name is Grace Holloway. I am a very old, very dear friend of the late Harold Monroe." The guests looked confused but intrigued. Harold's name carried weight in this town. Avery looked around at the guests, panic flaring in her eyes. She could not scream. She could not call the police, not in front of the pastor, not in front of the mayor's wife. She was trapped by her own desire for social perfection. "Oh," Avery stammered, forcing a grotesque smile onto her face. "Yes, Grace, of course. It has been years, but we are in the middle of dinner. Perhaps we can talk in the kitchen?" "I am afraid this cannot wait," Grace said pleasantly, unbuttoning her coat. Harold left specific instructions for a Christmas greeting to be delivered to his family. It is a bit of a tradition, isn't it? Honoring the patriarch. She looked at Pastor Nolan. "Pastor, wouldn't you agree that ignoring a dead man's final wish on Christmas Day would be unchristian?" The pastor wiped his mouth and nodded solemnly. "Indeed, we should always honor the memory of our elders." Avery looked like she wanted to vomit. She glared at Dan, silently commanding him to do something, but Dan was staring at Grace with his mouth slightly open. I stepped forward. "I actually have the video right here," I said, pulling my laptop from the sideboard where I had stashed it earlier. I connected the HDMI cable to the massive flat-screen TV that hung above the fireplace, the one Avery usually used to play a loop of a burning Yule log. "Sabrina, don't," Avery hissed, stepping toward me. "This is not the time. The technology is glitchy. We do not want to bore the guests." "It will only take a minute," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "You always say we should share memories of Grandpa, right?" I hit the spacebar. The image of the Yule log vanished, replaced by the high-definition face of Harold Monroe. The room went deathly silent. "Hello? Sabrina?" Harold's voice boomed through the surround sound speakers. Rich and clear. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." I watched the guests. Their forks hovered halfway to their mouths. They were captivated. Harold looked healthy, sharp, and undeniably alive on the screen. "If you are watching this," the video continued, "it means I am gone. And it means that my suspicions were correct. It means that every other method I tried to use to reach you, the letters, the emails, the phone calls, the trips to Colorado, failed. It means they successfully built a wall between us." A gasp went around the table. Mrs. Harrison put a hand to her throat. Avery froze, her hands gripping the back of her chair so hard her knuckles were white. "I saw her. Sabrina," Harold said, his blue eyes piercing through the screen. "I saw who she really was years ago. I heard Avery on the phone. She said, 'The old man is tighter with money than I thought. But do not worry. I have Sabrina handled. She is housebroken. She is like a puppy. If you kick her, she cowers.'" The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. I saw Mitchell, the financial advisor, slowly lower his wine glass to the table. He looked pale. He looked at Avery with a dawning expression of horror. "The will you have in your possession, the one Grace Holloway is guarding, is the only valid one," Harold declared. "I have left you the house, the land, and the portfolio. But there is a condition. You only get full access to the estate if you physically move out of that house and sever financial ties with Dan and Avery." Avery let out a strangled noise. She lunged toward the TV. "Turn it off!" she shrieked, forgetting the guests, forgetting the act. He was senile. He did not know what he was saying. "This is a fake. It is a deep fake." I stood in front of the TV, blocking her path. "I am not giving you money to make your prison more comfortable. Sabrina," Harold's voice continued behind me, "I am giving you money to blow the prison doors off." The video ended with his wink. The screen went black. Avery was panting, her chest heaving. She spun around to face the guests, her hands shaking. "I am so sorry," she stammered, her voice shrill. "You have to understand. Toward the end, poor Harold. His mind was gone. He had dementia. He was paranoid. He made up these terrible stories. We tried to protect his reputation, which is why we never showed this to anyone. Sabrina is she is confused. She thinks this is real." Grace Holloway stepped forward. She pulled a thick sheaf of papers from the manila envelope. "It is very real." "Mrs. Monroe," Grace said, her voice calm and authoritative, This video was recorded on September 24th, 3 months before Harold passed. I have a sworn affidavit from his physician, Dr. Eris Thorne, dated the same day, certifying that Harold Monroe was of completely sound mind and fully capable of making legal decisions. Grace slammed the papers down on the dining table, right next to the prime rib. "This is the last will and testament of Harold Monroe," Grace announced. "It was filed in Santa Fe and is currently in probate. It names Sabrina Erickson as the sole beneficiary of the estate, valued at over $2 million in land and assets, plus a cash trust that she has immediate access to." Avery turned to Mitchell. "Mitchell," she cried, desperate for an ally. Tell them this is irregular. Tell them about the refinancing. We need that equity to—" Mitchell stood up abruptly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. He held up his hands as if Avery were contagious. "Avery," he said, his voice tight, "if there is a contested will, if there is a question of ownership regarding the assets, I cannot touch the refinancing. The bank will not touch it." "What?" Avery screeched. "You promised. The loan comes due on Tuesday." "I cannot be involved in fraud." "Avery," Mitchell snapped, "if you knowingly concealed a valid will to leverage this property, that is a felony. I am out." He grabbed his coat from the back of the chair. "I am sorry. Dan, I have to go." Mitchell walked out. The dominoes were falling. Avery looked around the room. The pastor was looking at his shoes. The Harrisons were exchanging horrified glances. Her stage was collapsing. She turned on me, her eyes filled with a pure, homicidal rage. "You little bitch," she whispered, forgetting the audience entirely. "You think you can do this to me? In my house?" She took a step toward me, her hand raising. I did not flinch. I did not step back. "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through the tension, "there is one more video." I tapped the keyboard. The screen flickered again. This time, it was not the warm study of Santa Fe. It was the harsh, bright interior of the kitchen we were standing in right now. The timestamp in the corner read 12:45 p.m. Today. On the screen, Avery was shoving me into the wall. The sound of my body hitting the plaster was sickeningly loud. "You ungrateful little parasite!" the Avery on the screen screamed. "I should have thrown you out on the street the day your mother died." The guests gasped. Dan covered his face with his hands. "On the screen," I said, "you have no right to hit me. This is assault." And then, the room heard the line that sealed her fate. "Assault? Who is going to believe you? You are the crazy daughter. I feed you, I house you, I own you." I hit pause. The image froze on Avery's face, twisted in ugly, hateful rage. Her hand raised to strike me. I turned to the room. "She told everyone I was crazy," I said into the silence. "She called my boss today and told her I was having a breakdown. She told the pastor I was delusional. She tried to erase my credibility so that when I told you she was stealing from a dying man, you wouldn't believe me." I looked at Pastor Nolan. "Is that what a Christian home looks like?" "Pastor?" I asked softly. "A stepmother beating her daughter on Christmas morning because she wanted to open a gift from her grandfather?" Pastor Nolan stood up. He looked pale and shaken. He looked at Avery with profound disappointment. "Avery," he said, his voice heavy, I think we should leave." "No!" Avery cried, grabbing his arm. "Pastor, wait, it is out of context. She provoked me. She set me up. Can't you see? She planned this." Mrs. Harrison stood up too. She picked up her purse. "I think you have done enough." "Avery," she said coldly, "come on, warmth, we are leaving." One by one, the guests stood up. The sound of chairs scraping, of coats being gathered, was the only sound in the room. They did not look at Avery. They looked at the floor, or they looked at me with expressions of shock and pity. Avery stood in the middle of the ruins of her perfect dinner party. She was trembling. She looked at Dan. "Dan!" she screamed. "Do something! Tell them to stay! Tell them she is lying!" Dan Monroe sat at the table. He looked at the frozen image on the TV, his wife attacking his daughter. He looked at the legal papers Grace had put on the table. He looked at me, standing tall in my green dress with the bruise on my face. He slowly placed his napkin on the table. He looked at Avery, and his voice was barely a whisper, but in the silence, it sounded like a shout. "She is not lying. Avery, I saw you." Avery recoiled as if he had slapped her. "I saw you push her," Dan said, tears welling in his eyes. "I walked in right after. I saw the marks on her arm, and I told her to apologize to you." He put his head in his hands and began to weep. Avery stood alone. The guests were filing out the front door. Grace was packing the papers back into her briefcase. Mitchell was gone. Her husband was broken. I walked over to the table. I picked up the wooden box that I had placed next to my unused plate. I looked at Avery. She seemed smaller now. The red dress looked like a costume. The makeup looked like a mask. "You said you owned me," I said quietly. I held up the silver key to the safety deposit box. "You were wrong. You never owned me. You just borrowed my silence. And now, I am taking it back." I turned to Grace. "I am ready to go," I said. Grace nodded. She put a protective hand on my shoulder. "Let's go. Sabrina, you have a new life waiting." We walked out of the dining room, leaving Avery screaming at a room full of empty chairs and cold food. The image of her own cruelty frozen on the screen above her head. The silence that followed my statement was absolute. It was not the peaceful silence of a snowfall, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a bomb that had just detonated. The video frame on the television screen remained frozen, capturing Avery's face twisted in a mask of pure, unadulterated malice. It loomed over the dinner table like a grotesque portrait, a stark contrast to the carefully curated centerpieces and the untouched prime rib. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the crackling of the fire in the hearth, a sound that usually signaled comfort, but now felt like the snapping of dry bones. Then, Mrs. Gable, a prominent member of the church council who had sat quietly through most of the meal, cleared her throat. She placed her linen napkin on the table with deliberate precision. She looked at Avery, not with anger, but with a look of profound, chilling confusion. "Is this how you treat your husband's daughter on a holy day?" she asked. Her voice was soft, but in the dead quiet of the room, it carried the weight of a gavel strike. Avery flinched as if she had been slapped. The color that had drained from her face earlier rushed back in a blotchy, frantic flush. She looked at Mrs. Gable, then at Pastor Nolan, desperate to salvage the illusion she had spent years crafting. "No!" Avery stammered, her hands fluttering uselessly in the air. "You do not understand. The video, it lacks context." Sabrina was hysterical. She was threatening me. I was only trying to restrain her for her own safety. "Restrain her?" Mitchell echoed. He was standing by the door, his coat already halfway on. "Avery, you told her you owned her. We all heard it. That is not restraint. That is slavery." "I never said that," Avery shrieked, her voice cracking. "It is a deep fake. She edited it." I stepped forward, my movements calm and fluid. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching this scene from a great distance. The fear that had ruled my life for so long was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "It is not a fake. Avery," I said, "and the timestamp is embedded in the metadata. Grace has the original file. So does the cloud server I uploaded it to an hour ago." I turned to look at my father. Dan Monroe was still sitting at the head of the table, staring at his hands. He looked shrunken, as if the air had been let out of him. For years, he had been the master of looking away. He had perfected the art of selective blindness to keep the peace. But now, he was trapped. He had seen the video of his wife abusing his daughter. He had seen the video of his father explaining why he had to die alone to protect his assets. "Dad?" I said softly. Dan looked up. His eyes were red, rimmed with tears and shock. He looked at Avery, then at the frozen image on the screen, and finally at me. "I did not know," he whispered. "I did not know it was like that." "You knew enough," I said, my voice devoid of pity. You knew she hated me. You knew Grandpa stopped coming. You knew I was working double shifts and giving you the money. You just chose to believe the version that made your life easier." Dan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He closed his eyes, a single tear tracking through the wrinkles on his cheek. He was realizing, in real time, that his cowardice had cost him his entire family. He had traded his father and his daughter for a woman who viewed them all as ATMs. Grace Holloway stepped into the center of the room. She was the anchor in the storm, professional and unyielding. She opened the folder she had placed on the table earlier. "I need to clarify the terms of Harold Monroe's will for everyone present," Grace announced, her voice cutting through the emotional fog. "As the executor, I am bound to enforce his specific instructions." She looked directly at Avery. "The estate, including the ranch in Santa Fe, the investment portfolio, and the liquid cash assets, is valued at over $2 million. Harold left 100% of this to Sabrina Erickson. However, there is a contingency clause." Avery's head snapped up. Hope, sharp and desperate, flared in her eyes. "What clause?" she demanded. Grace adjusted her glasses. Harold was very specific. He stated that if Sabrina chooses to remain in this house, or if she uses a single penny of his money to support the debts of Dan or Avery Monroe, the entire estate is to be liquidated immediately and donated to the Red Cross. Sabrina gets nothing. Grace paused to let that sink in. "However," Grace continued, "if Sabrina accepts the inheritance, she acts as the sole owner of the trust. This grants her the legal authority to determine who benefits from the funds. Furthermore, the deed to the Santa Fe property is already in her name." Avery let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. "So what? She takes the money and runs? That is it? She steals our family legacy?" "It was never your legacy, Avery," I said. "It was his." Avery turned on me, her face twisting into a snarl. "You manipulated him. You poisoned him against us. You lured a sick, dying old man into changing his will." "I did not have to poison him," I replied. "You did that yourself when you forged his signature on those checks. Or did you think we would not find the bank records?" Avery went pale. Grace held up a piece of paper. "We have the logs. Mrs. Monroe, every withdrawal, every forged check. We have the dates you entered his safety deposit box. We have the emails you deleted from Sabrina's account. This is not just an inheritance dispute. This is a criminal case for fraud and elder abuse." Mitchell, standing by the door, looked like he was going to be sick. "I am leaving," Mitchell announced abruptly. "Avery, do not call my office on Tuesday. The refinancing application is canceled. I cannot have my firm associated with a property under criminal investigation." "No!" Avery screamed, running toward him. "Mitchell, please, we need that money, the balloon payment." Mitchell opened the door and walked out into the snow without looking back. The slam of the door echoed like a gunshot. Avery stood alone in the hallway. Her financial lifeline was cut. Her reputation was in shreds. She turned back to the dining room, her eyes wild. She looked at the guests who were now standing, hastily gathering their coats and purses. "Where are you going?" Avery cried. "Dessert. We have a Yule log. Stay, please." Mrs. Harrison walked past her, clutching her purse tight to her side. "I think we have seen enough. Avery," Mrs. Harrison said coldly, "I will be praying for you, but I do not think we will be seeing you at the club anytime soon." One by one, they filed out. Pastor Nolan stopped in front of me. He looked deeply shaken. "Sabrina," he said quietly, "I am so sorry. If you need a place to stay, I have a place," I said, cutting him off. "But thank you, Pastor." When the last guest was gone, the house felt cavernous. It was just me, Grace, Dan, and Avery. Avery walked back into the dining room. She looked smaller now. The rage was still there, but it was brittle, cracking under the weight of her reality. "You think you have won?" she hissed at me. "You think you can just take the money and leave? I will sue you. I will drag this out in probate for years. I will tell the court you are mentally incompetent. I have already spoken to people. Everyone knows you are unstable. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin file folder. I tossed it onto the table. It slid across the mahogany surface and stopped in front of her. Go ahead, I said. That is a copy of my intake assessment from Dr. Caleb Ross. I saw him this morning, before my shift. He is a forensic psychologist. His report certifies that I am completely lucid, stable, and suffering only from acute stress caused by a toxic domestic environment. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. Grace also has the video of you threatening to have me committed to cover up your crimes, I added. So please, Avery, sue me. I would love to play that video for a judge. Avery stared at the folder. Her hands were shaking. She knew she was beaten. She had played the card of my insanity, and I had trumped it with a certificate of sanity. I am moving out, I announced, my voice ringing clear in the room. I signed a lease on an apartment near the hospital this afternoon. I will be gone by tomorrow morning. I will hire movers to collect my furniture. I turned to my father. And Dad? I said, if you want to see me, you can call me, but I will not be coming back to this house, not while she is here. Dan looked up, his face gray. Sabby, please, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. No, I said firmly. You cannot fix 3 years of abuse with a counseling session. You stood there and watched her hit me. Dad, you watched her steal from your father. You let her erase me from this family because it was easier than fighting her. I picked up the wooden box from the table. I am taking the inheritance, I said. I am taking the money. I am taking the house in Santa Fe. And I am not giving you a dime to pay off the debts Avery created. Avery let out a low, guttural scream of frustration. She swept her arm across the table, sending the crystal wine glasses crashing to the floor. Red wine splattered across the white carpet like blood. Get out, she screamed. Get out of my house. It is not your house anymore, Avery, Grace said calmly, closing her briefcase. Without the refinancing, the bank will foreclose in 3 months, and Sabrina has no obligation to save it. Grace turned to me. Ready? I nodded. Ready? I walked out of the dining room without looking back. I could hear Avery sobbing behind me. Not tears of remorse, but tears of a narcissist who had lost her audience. I walked up the stairs to the attic room one last time. I packed a single suitcase. I took my nursing scrubs, my comfortable shoes, and the few photos of my mother I had managed to hide from Avery's purges. I carried the wooden box carefully, tucking it under my arm. When I came back down, my father was standing in the foyer. He looked like an old man. Sabrina, he croaked, I love you. I stopped. I looked at him, and I felt a wave of sadness, but it was a distant sadness, like looking at an old photograph of a house that had burned down. I know you do, Dad, I said, but you loved your comfort more. I opened the front door and walked out into the snowy night. Grace's car was waiting in the driveway, the engine running, sending plumes of white exhaust into the cold air. I got in the passenger seat and closed the door. The silence inside the car was beautiful. Drive, I said. 3 days later, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment. It was a small place, just a 1-bedroom on the 4th floor, but it was mine. I had paid the rent for 6 months in advance with the money from the trust. The air was crisp and cold, and the snow was falling softly over the city lights of Ridgefield. Inside, the apartment was sparse. I had not bought much furniture yet, but on the mantel of the fake fireplace, in the center of the room, sat the wooden box. I had spent the last 2 days sleeping. Real. Deep sleep. No screaming. No vacuuming at 6 a.m. No demands for potatoes. I had woken up when my body wanted to, not when fear woke me. I walked back inside and sat down at my small kitchen table. My laptop was open. I had an email drafted to Grace. Subject: Harold Monroe Scholarship Fund. Grace, please proceed with the paperwork. I want to set aside $500,000 from the estate to create a scholarship for nursing students who come from low-income backgrounds. We will name it the Harold Monroe Memorial Grant. Also, please finalize the restraining order against Avery. She called the hospital switchboard 3 times yesterday trying to get through to me. Administration has blocked her number, but I want it on paper. Thank you for everything, Sabrina. I hit send. I stood up and walked over to the box. I ran my fingers over the rough wood, tracing the initials H.M. carved into the lid. I thought about the grandfather who had played a long, lonely game of chess against a monster to save a granddaughter he could not even see. He had given me more than money. He had given me my spine back. I picked up the brass key and locked the box. I did not need to open it anymore. I knew what was inside. I carried the truth in my bones now. I looked out the window at the falling snow. Somewhere across town, in a big house with a wreath that was too large. Avery was likely screaming at a foreclosure notice. My father was likely sitting in a quiet room, regretting 1,000 small choices. But here, it was quiet. From now on. I whispered to the empty room, my voice steady and strong. I am not the maid. I am not the victim. I am the girl who opened the box, and I am the one who decides what happens next. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment down below and share your thoughts on Avery's karma. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story get heard by even more people.